How's everyone doing today? All right, I'm Arielle. I'm the Senior Director of Content and Community at Brand Innovators. I'm also the head of our Center of Excellence, and that's just a fancy way of saying I get to connect and consult with today's brightest leaders through forums such as this and many other initiatives where we bring brand marketers together all over the world. So today we're here for such an exciting panel because we're going to talk about Gen Z, which no one understands, even myself, I'm on the cusp. We're going to talk about how Gen Z is driving a community-first era of commerce. And before we begin, I'm going to hand it over to Janet and Shaina to give us a little bit of an overview on who they are as individuals and how they're poised to champion such a dynamic, passionate group of individuals that we call Gen Z. So I'll start with you, Shaina.
Hi everyone, good to see you all. I'm Shaina Zafar. I'm the co-founder and CMO of GroupM, which is a purpose-driven Gen Z marketing company. We've been around for 7.5 years, so we're older than toddler age now. But in the work that we do, we get to work with Fortune 500s, nonprofits, startups, and political campaigns to help them better understand young people by having a team of young people that actually get to ideate and co-create products, ideas, and campaigns with you. So anyone that works on a project is 27 or younger. I'm 23, and I know Arielle is saying that she doesn't always understand Gen Z. And as a Gen Zer myself, I oftentimes also don't understand my generation because we're not a monolith. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today and talk about why community is so important and what it looks like to think about community driving commerce. Thank you.
Great to be here. I also see so many familiar faces from my entire career, I feel like, in the audience. So good to see the familiar faces. Nice to meet everyone else. My name is Janet Levine. I work at Mindshare. I lead Global Invention. So Global Invention is, for all of our clients that we have, helping drive very creative and innovative media. So we have a very unique perspective of how media can work a lot harder. It's way more than distribution. Every single media channel, every single tactic has the ability to punch above its weight. So we are very culture forward, we are very idea driven, and most importantly, Mindshare is partnering with Juve, which is why we are here together. So this is not just two random people coming together. We have a deep and lasting partnership, and we're very excited to share some of the work that we've been doing with you all today.
I'm so glad to see that you're seeing familiar faces here at this event. That's what Brand Innovators is all about. Thank you so much for giving such a great background to your experiences. So I think before we even dive into the research and all the conversations that we're about to have, I need to ask the question of why community is so important to Gen Z.
Happy to kick that off. I think a lot of times when you think about marketing, people are concerned with KPIs and metrics of measurement and what is the ROI in the work that you're doing, but fundamentally so much of our work is about storytelling and about universal experiences and things that make us feel something and react to something. And especially because of the pandemic, a lot of the psychological and physical psyche of Gen Z has been changed by specific moments in our lifetime, right? A generation that was shaped by 9/11, a financial crisis, the pandemic, and fundamentally had to reimagine the way that we think about institutions around us and the people that we choose to be in community with. Because sometimes it's felt like the institutions that were meant to empower us have actively disempowered us. So that means that you're leaning in on your local networks, your friends, your peers, the people around you to find the most amount of comfort, and that can be both in person and online. But I think fundamentally, community speaks this notion that you want to feel comforted by the places and people that you're around, and Gen Z's craving that. Moments, the in-between moments where you get to say hi to someone in the office, right? Those are things that were taken away from us in the past few years, especially. So I think community is something that we're all craving, but I think for Gen Z in particular, as we're going through a lot of transitional phases in our lives, it's become really critical for us to examine what our relationships look like and where do they actually exist and how do we nurture and foster them as well.
Yeah, and I would build, you really have to we use community a lot. It's a term that's thrown around, but what does it actually mean? And when you start to dimensionalize it, you realize that it's really powerful for Gen Z because community is about shared values. It's about shared vernacular. It's about inside jokes. Think of any major community. It could be from a fandom, if there's any Swifties in the room. Think about the game that is played when Taylor Swift is performing. If you don't know about the game, then you're not in that community. And that's why it's really important. I also read an article yesterday, and it was about how when girls turn 13, and this is subconsciously, but subconsciously they don't, they actively disengage from their parents' voice. So if you think your teenager isn't listening to you, there's real research that says they're not. But who they are listening to is their peers. And that's why if you're in this community and you have this vernacular and the values and the shared experiences, that's where you're going to want to be, and those are the voices that you want to hear and engage with each and every day.
All right, I'm already learning so much. I mean, I just learned that 13-year-old girls don't listen to their parents. Excited to continue. So take us a little bit into the research that you've done together. I think that we have a slide with some exciting information. So why don't you take us through that?
Sure. So we're bringing it back to the Maslow hierarchy of needs. We started to think about, from a Gen Z perspective, what do needs look like for this generation? And at the very bottom, I'm not going to go through this step by step because in our conversation we're going to unpack it, but at the highest level, we realized that there's a new need state for Gen Z. And if we're thinking about media, Gen Z really is the pulse of being a disruptive media brand, because Gen Z really pushes us to be way more modern, more digital, more social. And so what we did is a lot of quantitative and qualitative research with Juve and through Mindshare, and we realized that there's this new order, a new ladder for Gen Z that starts with a different type of need at the bottom and works all the way to the top. But this, again, is through the lens of a generation, and it's really social, digital, and commerce-driven for how all of Gen Z behaves. And if we follow this model, we really think this is how marketers should be behaving today.
Is there anything, Shaina, that you'd like to add to the pyramid?
Yeah, I think in terms of the way that we've structured it, it's reflective of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the sense that, like, the basic level of this is like the same idea of your physiological needs and what does it look like to create a safe environment for Gen Zs, and what is the role of brands and platforms, which is what we'll get into. And then the top of hybrid advocacy is reflective of self-actualization. So the idea is that how do we take this idea of brands actually being accountable to the way that Gen Zers feel, act, and then also engage with brands? It's a fundamental reimagining of what that relationship is. I think oftentimes you think about your consumers in a power dynamic, right? That you are selling a product to them rather than saying you're co-creating with them. And fundamentally, a lot of what we're seeing in this pyramid structure is that we've flipped that around, right? To say that you can really meaningfully engage with your consumers and treat them like partners, don't treat Gen Zers as guinea pigs, treat them as partners. So a lot of our conversation today is going to be around how do you tactically co-create with your consumers, and how do we reimagine what that power dynamic looks like, because we think the future of business and the brands that are going to excel the most are those that are community first.
So as we're talking about Gen Z, understanding Gen Z, your research is showing that this generation is both the loneliest, yet the most well-connected generation of their time. But can you talk about that? Because that's definitely a juxtaposing set of ideas, and would love to hear your thoughts.
66% of Gen Zers say that they feel more comfortable sharing their feelings online than they feel they're able to in person. And I think that's interesting because social media is one of those places where we get to benefit a lot because we get to connect with people immediately. And I think unlike millennials that were digital natives, Gen Zers are social media natives. So what that fundamentally means is that we've never had to use the internet to reconnect with anyone. If you look at a millennial that's posting on Instagram, it's probably because you're re-engaging with your friends from college, or you're posting a selfie that's way too close to your face because Gen Zers would never do that. But the idea being that we've never had to reconnect with anyone ever in our lives. Instead, we've gotten to really express our identities and the things that we're passionate about online. But that doesn't mean that Gen Zers only want to stay in a one-dimensional online platform, right? Or in a digital space either. I think we'll talk about this idea a lot of being phygital. What does it mean to bring both the physical and the digital together? So when I was 14, I had a One Direction fan page. I thought I was going to marry Zayn. That did not happen. But when I ran that One Direction fan page and I was making memes that went viral, and I was in community with thousands of other young teens that also thought they were going to marry Zayn, we always wanted to meet in person, though, right? The idea wasn't that I only got to interface with them online in my DMs or communicate with them in those ways. You wanted to meet with that person in real life, to hug them, to laugh with them, to see them and say that you're a real person. I wasn't getting catfished. So I think there's something to be said about how Gen Zers use platforms to perform about their identities, but at the same time, what does it mean to actually meaningfully feel safe on a platform? And what is the onus of these platforms to create places and spaces where we feel comfortable to express our identities, right? And I think a large part of it also is that people feel digital fatigue. After the pandemic, we felt really, or we're not even in a really post-pandemic world either, but there was a sense of feeling really overwhelmed and overstimulated by the world around you. And I think people feel digital fatigue. And that means that brands need to create space for you to actually convene with people in person. And oftentimes at Juve, we'll say that the only ROI that we care about is that, did you meet a bestie? That Janet and I can actually text each other and talk to each other and have a real relationship beyond the work that we do. And I think for Gen Zers, it's the same thing, that if a brand can be the reason that you met your bestie, you will always remember that. You're going to go back and engage in a loyalty loop and keep buying that product because you'll always remember that that was the reason that you bonded with someone, because they actually led to an in-person relationship for you. And I don't think brands always think in those ways of what does it mean for that person's actual real-life experience to be a part of that story versus just selling a product for the sake of a use case or a viral moment or because a creator said so.
I know I made it because everyone at Juve calls me bestie, so I know one by one I'm really I'm making an impression with them. I would also say we have to be more thoughtful of using emotion to reach Gen Z. We have creative campaigns, we push it out there, we hope that that creative campaign actually sticks with whatever emotion we think. Is it humor, is it happiness, is it sadness? But you know, technology and our research is so good now that in a non-creepy way, you could start to understand what is the emotion of an audience that we want to go after. Is this a one-on-one moment where maybe Gen Z does feel lonely and we need to come up with a solution? Is it a one-to-many where we're talking about a fandom where there's lots of positivity and excitement? And we have the ability to start to understand not just the one emotion, but the mix of emotions that are happening for Gen Z and figure out the right places and spaces, creative, media environment, and start to make it really come together so that we're helping in these moments and not just passively watching a generation who feels anxiety or lonely, but actually use the media to do some good. And I'd say the final bit is, you know, try to think about it as an evergreen, a commitment that you make to help on emotion, because we do a lot of these purpose-based campaigns, which they're all great. Like, why would we ever tear down any one great campaign that's helping with a serious matter, like, you know, if someone's lonely? But how do we be a consistent ally in that space time and time again?
So we're diving into, you know, some of the sections on the pyramid right now, but let's get a little bit deeper. Can you go through some of the stages that we haven't talked about yet and tell us what each of the levels represent?
Yeah, I think for the one that I'll lean into is this idea of formulated fandom. So this notion that Gen Z loves this idea of inclusive exclusivity. And what I mean by that is that you want to feel like you're part of the joke and you know what's happening, and it's a little bit gatekept, but at the same time, anyone has the ability to join your community or your interest base because you've created that level of comfort and access for anyone to come in. A good example of this would be something like a Supreme shoe drop, right? People are willing to spend a lot of time and wake up at 5 a.m. to see the shoe drop and want to, number one, feel like that's a coveted item that only a few have access to, but at the same time, a large amount of Gen Zers will show up and rally for that viral shoe or that viral campaign, for example. But I think the idea of how do you get into the in-group and how do you create cultural moments that actually become the conversation, right? So Young Kang, who's an incredible CMO marketer, was named Brand Genius and is really, really bright, you know, did this. We've done some work with her in EOS, and when the creator used the EOS shaving cream, the whole reason why that actually became a best-selling product for them was because one UGC creator who they didn't even pay, who organically talked about the product, gave a step-by-step overview of what the shaving cream did, how she used it in her private area in a not safe for work kind of tone, and it went super viral, and sales started skyrocketing, and then EOS actually built a product with the exact directions the creator had, right? Had her be a part of that campaign and really got to co-create it with her because she had her own fandom, right? But I think that idea of making it formulaic is up to the brand, is up to the creative, is up to the person that actually wants to take something to the next level. But I think marketing that's done on a really fast timeline, that's really current to culture and current to the way that even creator communities exist, is really interesting, and it's the way that marketing should be going forward, right? It shouldn't just feel like it's a 6-month longitudinal study with things that are referenced back over a long period of time when Gen Zers trends are changing day by day. They're not just changing, they're changing minute by minute even. So I think this idea of fandom and how do we democratize that and what does fandom look for each different brand is something that we're spending a lot of time thinking about. And if you don't need to create it, what are the pre-existing places where you should show up in culture that have real cultural cachet?
Yeah, and don't be afraid. Fandom, I think there's a misnomer that fandom always means the biggest IPs in culture. It does, but to us, fandom also means community. So if there's a smaller community, how would you treat it if you were going to say, great, I want to do a 360 effort with the Swifties? What if there's a smaller community and you took that same effort and really surprised, delighted, or add value to those consumers? Because even though they don't have scale, it's quality. It's the right type of consumer. And there's just, I mean, it's endless. Think of TikTok. There's every type of corner. Those corners for us are communities, and some are small and some are big. Do we have time to go into one more of the?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I think we should go into the ultimate level of hybrid advocacy. We have a moment.
Yeah.
I touched on this a little bit, but I think the idea is that how does your sense of self actually extend beyond what you claim to be true, and what is a role that a brand plays in that? And what I mean by that is oftentimes we view our relationships very much so to just be around a product being sold or a product going viral and a campaign doing empirically well by whatever metric we defined it. But I think to say that a brand actually is something that I love, a brand is something that someone that cares for me, someone that looks out for me, someone that I think has my best interests. Not that many brands speak to that kind of emotional language that Gen Zers resonate with, unless it's a brand that has a lot of affinity with us, right? It could be something that's thought of in your everyday use case, right? Whether you're thinking of like a Spotify of sorts, right? Today's Wrapped. Wrapped is out today, and mine is embarrassing, but it was expected to be this way. But all of it to say that I think things like that, where the reason why something like Wrapped does so well is because it is around community. It is around people giving their data away willingly because they want to see a product that actually feels like it's adding value to them. And Gen Zers are willing to give away their data and for more personalized products. We know that that's true about them. People ask about data protection and privacy protection. Gen Zers aren't scrutinizing those things in the same ways because we know that ads are everywhere, that our data is being used for things all the time, and if it is going to be used, then give us a product that we're excited by, that we want to share. And I think the best way to describe what hybrid advocacy would look like is if you're a brand that's being talked about in my group chat, if you're the brand that before I buy the product, I'm sending it to my friends to get a review from them or a text message like to affirm, is this the right choice? Because we all feel insecure about our day-to-day decisions when it comes to a product or when it comes to something that we want to buy, and we want it to make it feel like it's vetted. And word of mouth is still the number one reason through which Gen Zers actually buy a product. So hybrid advocacy to me just means like, are you a topic in conversations, and is there a way for us to actually feel like a brand is tied to us beyond just our consumer experience? Then that means you've self-actualized as a brand.
Yeah, a different framing of it is if you get to the top, it means you've achieved the other levels. And exactly what was just being said means that you've reinvented loyalty for Gen Z. And I think that's a really important topic. I'm sure this is going to be said many times today, but the cookie probably will crumble a bit in 2024. We're losing data on a very evasive audience anyway. And if we could start to tap into the communities, if we could start to use digital experiences, which are much more inventive and tech forward, and I actually kind of think digital, in a sense, can be the direct mail for Gen Z of today, because you do something in an environment that you really love, and now you're getting something physical out of it. You know, there's something to be said, and not like how many Gen Zers are getting a lot of mail, but how happy are you when you receive a gift? So it's very interesting. But as you can move all the way to the top, it means that someone is going to be not just buying your product, using it, but an actual advocate and someone that has lifetime value. And that is why it's really important to go through these steps, really try to audit what you're doing in media and marketing, really tap into community, really start to look at what it means for Gen Z, and then drive yourself all the way to the top where now you've created just the fandom for your brand. It's not just a fandom that Gen Z wants to be a part of. You actually become the thing that they can't stop talking about in the chats.
You know, I love how you mentioned the word loyalty, because one of the questions that I had prepared to ask that we didn't run through was, is it possible to reach loyalty with Gen Z? So here, obviously, clearly it is. It's so interesting. Also, super excited about Spotify Wrapped. Can't wait to check that out after. Okay, so we're at the peak of holiday shopping season. We're thinking about this pyramid. And commerce in general, what are some of the key takeaways that this group can leave with?
My quick answer would be to not just focus on the holiday season of shopping. I think that de-influencing is something that's become really popular with Gen Z, and this idea that if we're number one, like, should we even be accumulating this many things? Number two, if we are going to choose to buy a product, what is the reason and are we intentional with it? And I think sometimes we attach ourselves to tadpole moments that we know are really going to be peaks of buying and consumption, which is really fair in terms of calendar planning and quarter planning. But I think the fundamental reorientation of what this research has shown us is that you should want to do things that feel a lot more meaningful, long term, and like sustaining relationships, because it's the right thing to do over a long period of time, right? Like, the idea of doing an influencer campaign and paying one creator X amount of money, I don't think resonates as much as it did before, versus when you're actually doing a long-term campaign and they become an ambassador for you. When we've done events for brands, right, like when the creators come in, like, they'll give us a hug, right? They'll be like, I'm so happy to see you, I'm so excited to see you, like, they're almost guaranteed to post because we have personal relationships with them, and I'll be like, you didn't post a story. They'll be like, oh, okay, I got you. What's the hashtag? But the fundamental difference there, though, is that it's built on our relationship with the creator, right? The fact that I can go to them and say that I know their name, I know their, like, birth sign, I know their, like, co-star rising, like, all of those things that actually create really real relationships with us, and I think brands have the ability to do that as well. And if that's the truth, then the idea of actually creating something long-term with them is a lot more meaningful. But I think as the holiday season comes about, the brands and the campaigns that are going to resonate and touch the most are the ones that are at least done interestingly and differently, than rather than saying, here's a product, here's a sale, just buy it, it's on clearance. And instead the campaigns that actually feel like they were thoughtful, they have a longer strategy and a more meaningful strategy beyond that. And I do think that de-influencing means that Gen Zers are more critically examining the things that they choose to buy. That doesn't mean TikTok Shop isn't resonating. That doesn't mean that I have not bought from TikTok Shop. I have, because it's a 20% off code, and like Gen Zers love a good deal, so I'm not going to deny that either. But I do think that what our research and what the work that we're doing today is about, how do you create long-term value, and how do you maybe make that holiday moment a part of a larger campaign around holiday community, around different, cultural and ethnic and religious moments even that might resonate with your audience that you don't always give the same amount of airtime to. So I'd encourage brands to think about the holiday season critically too, in terms of what are the communities and the conversations that you want to be a part of, and how does that even fit into your other cultural moments and strategy.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Moments are fleeting, campaigns are fleeting, one-off efforts are fleeting. Communities are long-standing. Listen to the community, see what they want. That's how you win. That's how you're disruptive, because you're not pushing your message or your product that goes to everyone. We're marketers. We have the ability to sign an influencer at a moment's notice. We can change the packaging. We can use technology if you can't change the packaging to make it scannable so there's a unique experience. Give the community more of what they love. And you don't have to have a holiday strategy per se. It's, within the holiday time frame, how do you give more value and more of the things that communities love? How do you enable that the most?
All right, so we're going to end on one question, which I'm super excited to ask, but what do you think is the biggest misconception of Gen Z? And I'm going to start with you on this first.
I don't think it's a misconception. It's just, like any generation or community, I just think there are so many facets of Gen Z, and culture is moving at rapid points in time. We just have to keep up. We have to be using our media and creative to be as agile and nimble as Gen Z. Otherwise, you're just irrelevant.
There's been a lot of buzz around the Great Resignation, and I call that the Great Reawakening for Gen Z, in the sense that I think for the first time, young people are really interrogating what it looks like for them to have a quality of life that they're excited by, and also what does a work-life balance look like? Do you live to work or do you work to live? And I think sometimes it can feel like Gen Zers are pretentious or entitled, but I think we also want to learn from other people. Every generation has to push the status quo. There is no doubt about that. When we look at social justice movements, when we look at the quality of life over time, I'm able to sit here because people who have been before me have been in rooms that have really advocated for people like me to be here, right? As a woman of color in marketing, as a South Asian, as a proud Muslim, I take parts of my identity and I'm really proud of them, and I show up with them every single day to work. Companies will say that I don't want to take a political stance, but I think a lot of the times what we're most afraid of is being partisan. It's not about being political. Inherently, my identity is political because it's a part of who I am, and I think for Gen Zers, we've been able to advocate for ourselves and talk about ourselves and be in rooms and spaces that weren't necessarily built for us, but I think we also want to learn from other people, and intergenerational dialogue and forums where you can actually challenge and have intellectual, critical debates and forums I think are really important. So my misconception that I would want to debunk is that Gen Zers aren't necessarily entitled, and we're here to learn. We definitely have opinions. Don't get that twisted. We definitely will very loudly and proudly say opinions. But even within my team, I find myself being challenged all the time by my Gen Zers, and we are a hard bunch to manage because I also manage Gen Zers. I'm not here to say that we're easy, but I think more places and forums for intergenerational dialogue are what we need, and also to learn from the people that have done this before us, because I definitely have ideas and thoughts, but there are other people that have been doing this a lot longer than I have, so I have a lot of respect and gratitude for the people that have allowed for people like me to be here too.
So well said. So I know we're coming up at time, but I just want to do a quick round of lightning questions. Does anyone have any?
That was an awesome panel. Fantastic. What would you say is the difference between life stage and what is truly different about Gen Z? What's going to go away as you guys get older? You have kids, you got bills to pay, big bills to pay, that kind of thing, and what's going to stay the same?
I think right now, already for Gen Zers, I'll answer the question by saying that I think there's a lot of moral inconsistencies with Gen Z, right? We'll claim that we care about sustainability, and then we'll buy from fast fashion. We'll say that we care about the environment, right? And then we'll still go on lavish vacations and trips and save up for them. But I don't think that's unique to Gen Z. What I will say is unique to Gen Z is that right now, when you look at our buying power, right, like the amount that your child or if you have kids at home, right, are able to influence in your home, it's palpable. Like if they want a specific cereal, odds are you're going to buy that cereal. Right now, Gen Zers are spending a lot of their parents' money, which means that if they want to buy a sustainable or more expensive option, they can. But I think what we'll see is as Gen Zers get older and they start using their own, income, I don't necessarily know if those trends are going to follow through. What I do think that means for brands and companies, though, is that there needs to be effective alternatives, because what we're seeing is a lot of legacy companies are suffering from their sales quarters to their actual product lines, because direct-to-consumer and up-and-coming brands give you other products that you're excited by that are at a more equitable price point, that are good for you, that feel good for you, and are good for the environment, good for your sense of self. So what I think that means for legacy brands is how do you create alternatives that are both make you feel good, right, that are priced at an equitable price point and are accessible, because I do think those things are going to matter for Gen Z in the long term, and we're already seeing that from a values perspective in terms of how we view social issues and how we view political issues, as well as our own buying power, and what does my dollar say to me, and what does it mean if I don't give my dollar to a specific company, because that actually does matter to their P&L, and I think Gen Z is very much so acutely aware of what that means for them. And if that doesn't happen, I'm going to use the platforms I have access to perform, right? This idea of calling out brands, calling in brands, actually reading sustainability reports. Like, there are people who genuinely do their homework and research, and I think a lot more of Gen Zers are doing their due diligence to figure out whether or not they want to engage with a brand. And if they don't want to, is it better if I go to a startup brand or an up-and-coming emerging direct-to-consumer brand instead?
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much. This was just such an incredible panel. I especially want to say, yeah, give it up. You know what, give it up. I especially want to say that when typically we talk about Gen Z, there are so many buzzwords that are thrown around by people who are trying to just comprehend what different things mean. And so I want to thank you for not only educating us and making us aware of all of these misconceptions and things that we need to learn, but not using those buzzwords and elaborating so clearly and effortlessly about this generation. So thank you.
Thank you, Arielle.